Hey everybody, I'm Chef Tom with allthingsbbq.com, and this is salt and pepper pork spare ribs. Well, today we're smoking up some simple salt and pepper pork spare ribs, taking some cues from our friends down in Texas. In fact, a lot of y'all might consider this to be a Texas-style rib, save for just a couple of small differences, which we'll get into in the cook. Now, we are going to be spritzing our ribs today with a mixture of apple cider vinegar, and some whiskey, which is going to add a really great texture to the outside of an already really barky rib with savory flavors. So this is the rack of spare ribs that we're working with today. This is a Creekstone Farms Duroc pork spare rib. It's got the chine bone attached here. You've got your rib tips down here. And this is also one of the first places you're gonna see just a little deviation from the Texas style, and that's in how we're gonna trim these up today. Now I'm gonna start by taking off this little bit of skirt. That's great meat that you can add into your grind for sausage. Also, you could just smoke it up as a little chef snack if you want. But I'll talk about here the difference in trimming styles. In Texas, you're gonna find a bit longer rib. It's gonna include most of this rib tip. Of course, you gotta take the chine bone off anyway, just because you can't really do much with that bone on there. But instead of including the rib tips in the actual rib, we're gonna cut those off, so square this up St. Louis style. And we're gonna do that so that we can do a full recipe video on rib tips themselves, which you guys will see shortly. So this whole piece right here is full of these bits of cartilage. And this is the part that we actually cut up and smoke for rib tips, which is a great little snack. And instead of including that and doing a fully authentic kind of Texas style rib, we're gonna set those aside for a separate purpose. And what we're left with here is just the bone section of the spare ribs. So I'm gonna come down here to the smaller end, and we'll just go ahead and take off that last bone with a little meat on it. Again, that's probably gonna go in with the rib tips. Also square up this end. We wanna make sure if we're on our last bone here that nothing's poking out, and we do have a little bit of exposed bone there, so I'm gonna just come right to the very edge of that bone and take that off. And you really haven't lost a lot, but again, something you can throw in with the rib tips to cook for a snack. So now you've kind of got your St. Louis trim here. We're not going for like comp style. I don't need to make this super pretty or exactly even. This is a rib for eating, not for judging. But what I am gonna do is I'm gonna take this membrane, this papery membrane off the back side of the ribs, just because I know I'm not gonna eat it later. I mean, you can chew on it if you like to. There's nothing wrong with that, but I don't believe it to really add a lot if you leave it on. I'd rather take it off and get some seasoning underneath it. So if you can work your paper towel underneath that membrane, you're just gonna take off as much of it in one pull as you can. I mean, with that membrane, not much more comes off with it except for just a little bit of fat on the backside. But these pork spare ribs are so fatty because they come from the same area as the pork belly. And that intramuscular fat's gonna leave you plenty of moisture in your ribs. So not gonna go crazy on the trimming, like I said. That's all I really feel like I need to do to these. At this point, we're gonna mix up our spritz because I wanna use that as a binder for our rub. So like I said, for the spritz, we're gonna do equal parts apple cider vinegar, apple juice or apple cider, and bourbon. And it's really important that you use a bourbon that you enjoy drinking because there's a lot left in the bottle. So we're gonna hit these ribs with some of this spritz, just enough to get our rub to bind. Speaking of which, today we are using the new Cattleman's Grill Lone Star brisket rub. This is a rub that I developed for Cattleman's, but it's very simple, very straightforward, mostly salt and pepper with just a little bit of roasted garlic and just a tiny bit of celery seed. It's about as straightforward as it gets without using salt and pepper alone. So same thing on the other side now. Hit it with some of our spritz. And then the Lone Star. Now, if you're concerned about the whiskey in the Spritz, that's a valid concern. Maybe you're trying to feed this to a whole family. Just know that it will burn off. There's not going to be any alcohol actually on the ribs when you go to eat them. But even if it's just for flavor's sake, you're not a fan, just leave it out. Use your apple cider vinegar, and you'll be golden. All right, so now that those are generously seasoned, we're gonna let them sit just for, 5 minutes or so until that rub really starts to attach to the meat, and then we'll head over to the smoker. Now today we're smoking on the Yoder Smoker's YS 1500S pellet grill. We're running hickory pellets at 275 degrees. So we're gonna throw these on the top rack, right next to a couple of racks that have already been smoking away for about 2.5 hours. Up top here, they get plenty of smoke circulation. You stay away from any kind of more direct heat, so it's a gentler cook. Give them just enough room to make sure that smoke can move around them. And then, as you can see with these ones that have been on for a couple hours, getting a little bit of color, starting to shrink back a little bit already. These are being spritzed every 45 to 60 minutes. Just like that, that's all it takes. I'll let these get a head start before we start spritzing them. I want to give you guys an update. It's been about 5 hours since our ribs went on. We've been spritzing these every 45 to 60 minutes. As you can see, this one's still got quite a bit of bounce left in it. By the time these are done, we'll be able to pick them up in the middle and the ends will stay on the rack, kind of like this. This one's quite a bit further along. We're just gonna swap these spots real quick because sometimes you get a little bit more intense heat where the air is exiting the stack there. We're gonna hit these again with just a little bit more spritz, and we'll check back on them shortly because like I said, these are looking like they're getting pretty close. You're seeing that pullback, you're seeing a little bit of breakage. So those are looking good, and we'll be back to check on them shortly. Well, it's been 6 hours since our ribs first went on, and our first rack is ready to come off. So let's take a look and talk about how to know when your ribs are done. So again, the first indicator that I like to go by is picking up that middle. You see if the ends stay on the grate, that's a sign that they're pretty close, if not all the way done. The other thing I look at is when it starts to crack open like that. That cracking tells me that meat's pretty tender. And then the last thing you can kind of look at here is the way the bone moves in relation to the meat. So you can see how that's completely freed from the meat. If you twist that meat, it moves around the bone does not move with it. That's a good indicator that your ribs are all the way done. So we're gonna throw this on the tray. We'll cover it up with some foil and let it rest. Probably a good 30 minutes before we slice into it. All right, these ribs are rested, so let's get them sliced and get a taste. I like to flip them over just because it makes it easier to see where those bones are, and you can cut right in between. So in a dry style rib like this, you can expect that the exterior is gonna be a little bit crusty, but we should have some really nice juiciness still right in the center. So you can see that peppery crust on the outside, nice and barky, but if we look into the center, look at all that fat just sitting in there. I'm not gonna squeeze it all out, but this is what I love about spare ribs. There may not be a huge hunk of meat on top of them like there is with baby backs or back ribs, but what's there is just so enjoyable. Oh man. That's my ideal doneness right there. So when I bite it, I can pull it away from the bone, but it doesn't fall away just on its own. So it's not overcooked, it's not mush, it's still got some texture to it, but just melts in your mouth. This is one of my favorite flavor profiles for pork, for beef, for whatever. It's so simple, but so delicious. Woo. Let me finish it here. The Spritz, I don't taste a lot of whiskey, and I don't want to. It's fine. It's there, it's subtle. You're getting a little bit of the tang of the apple cider vinegar. But for the most part, what that's doing is it's helping to create this great bark on this rib. It changes the texture on the outside a bit. I love that there's a bit of back end flavor, but overall, I'm just happy with a very simple, savory pork rib. This is right in my wheelhouse for sure. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to check out allthingsbbq.com for all the products featured in today's video. If you enjoyed the recipe, hit that subscribe button. And if you have any questions or comments, or there's anything you'd like to see me cook, let me know in the comment section down below, and let's be good to one another. For more recipes, tips, and techniques, head over to allthingsbbq.com/thesauce. All Things Barbecue, where barbecue legends are made.